The rain hammered against the kitchen window of their modest Denver suburban home as Sarah Martinez stared at the divorce papers scattered across the granite countertop. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen, the same pen she'd used to sign their marriage certificate 8 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. "You know what, Sarah?" Michael's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the dimly lit kitchen. His once charming smile had long since been replaced by a permanent sneer. "No one will want you after this divorce. Look at yourself." Sarah's eyes met her reflection in the toaster's chrome surface. At 32, she saw what Michael saw. Dark circles under her brown eyes from countless sleepless nights. Graying, roots showing through her once lustrous black hair, and 20 pounds she'd gained from stress eating during their tumultuous final year of marriage. "You're damaged goods now," Michael continued, adjusting his expensive tie. He was dressed for success as always. His real estate career had flourished while their marriage crumbled. Who's going to want a divorced woman with no career, no prospects? "You've been out of the workforce for 6 years playing house." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Sarah had given up her promising marketing career when they'd tried to start a family that never came despite years of trying, failed fertility treatments, and mounting medical bills that had drained their savings. I can work again," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm outside. Michael laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the kitchen tiles. "Doing what? Your skills are ancient history. The marketing world moved on without you, sweetheart. You're 32, not 22. Companies want fresh blood, not someone who's been playing housewife for half a decade." Sarah's grip tightened on the pen. Each word was another weight added to the crushing burden of self-doubt she'd carried for months. The failed pregnancies had already made her feel broken. Now Michael was confirming her worst fears about her worth as a person. "Sign the papers, Sarah. Let's get this over with. Maybe you'll find some desperate guy who'll settle for you, but don't hold your breath." Michael grabbed his keys from the counter, the jingling sound like chains in Sarah's ears. "I'm staying at Rebecca's tonight." Rebecca. His 26-year-old assistant, with the perfect smile and perfect figure. The woman he'd been working late with for the past 6 months. Sarah had known, of course. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd stopped looking at her the way he used to. The front door slammed, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the papers that would end her life as she knew it. She signed her name with shaking hands, each letter feeling like a small death. Outside, the October storm raged on, matching the tempest in her heart. That night, Sarah sat on their king-sized bed, soon to be just her bed, clutching a photo from their honeymoon in Hawaii. They'd been so happy then, so full of dreams and plans. She'd believed in forever. She'd believed in them. The house felt cavernous around her, every corner holding memories that now felt like ghosts. The nursery they'd painted yellow, neutral for the baby that never came. The kitchen where they'd cooked together during happier times. The living room where they'd planned their future. Sarah pulled out her laptop, its screen casting a pale glow in the darkness. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she opened a job search website. Michael's words echoed in her mind. "Your skills are ancient history." Maybe he was right. Maybe she was unemployable. Maybe she was unlovable. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the layers of hurt and self-doubt, a tiny spark of defiance flickered. It wasn't much, barely more than an ember, but it was there. And sometimes, that's all it takes to start a fire. The next morning brought crisp autumn air and the harsh reality of single life. Sarah stood in front of her bathroom mirror, really looking at herself for the first time in months. The woman staring back was tired, broken, but still breathing, still here. "Okay, Sarah," she whispered to her reflection. "What now?" Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Jessica. "Coffee at 10? Need to talk." Sarah quickly typed back, "Yes. Please." At the local Starbucks on Colfax Avenue, Jessica Martinez Chen, a successful pediatric nurse with kind eyes and an infectious laugh, took one look at Sarah and immediately pulled her into a fierce hug. "He actually said that to you?" Jessica's voice was barely controlled fury as they sat in a corner booth, steam rising from their lattes. Sarah nodded, unable to meet her friend's eyes. "Maybe he's right, Jess. I mean, look at me. I haven't worked in 6 years. I don't even know who I am anymore outside of being his wife." "Stop." Jessica's hand slammed on the table, causing several patrons to look their way. "Don't you dare let that narcissistic asshole define your worth. You are brilliant, Sarah. You were a rising star at Morrison Marketing before you left. You have skills, intelligence, and heart. More heart than he ever deserved. But no buts. You took time off to build a family. That's not a failure. That's sacrifice. And now you get to rediscover who Sarah Martinez is when she's not being diminished by someone who was threatened by your potential." Sarah felt tears welling up. The first tears she'd allowed herself to shed since signing the papers. "I'm scared, Jess. What if I can't do it? What if he's right?" Jessica reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "Then we'll prove him wrong. Together. But first, we're getting you some help. I know an amazing therapist, Dr. Patricia Williams. She helped me through my divorce 3 years ago. I can't afford therapy right now. The divorce is already costing my treat. Consider it an investment in your future, and mine, because I can't wait to see the look on Michael's face when you're thriving without him." As they walked out of the coffee shop into the Denver sunshine, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. It was fragile and tentative, like the first green shoots after a long winter. But it was real. That afternoon, Sarah sat in Dr. Patricia Williams's cozy office in the Cherry Creek area, surrounded by warm colors and comfortable furniture that made the space feel more like a living room than a medical facility. "Tell me about yourself, Sarah," Dr. Williams said, her voice gentle but encouraging. She was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. "Not about your marriage, not about your ex-husband. Tell me about you." The question caught Sarah off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked about her? Just her. I don't know where to start." "Start anywhere. What did you love as a child?" "Books," Sarah said without hesitation. "I devoured everything I could get my hands on. Nancy Drew, then Stephen King, then classics. I used to write stories too, terrible ones, but I loved the process of creating something from nothing. What else? I loved puzzles. Marketing was like solving puzzles, figuring out what made people tick, what would make them connect with a brand or product. I was good at it." Sarah paused, remembering. "I was really good at it." Dr. Williams smiled. "You still are. Skills like that don't just disappear. They evolve, they grow, they adapt. The question is, what do you want to do with them now?" Over the next hour, Sarah found herself talking about dreams she'd buried, goals she'd set aside, parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. For the first time in years, she wasn't talking about Michael or their failed marriage or her perceived failures. She was talking about possibilities. As the session ended, Dr. Williams handed Sarah a small notebook. "I want you to write in this every day. Not about the past, about the future. What you want, what you're going to do to get it, what you're grateful for. Small things, big things, everything in between." That night, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with the notebook open in front of her. She wrote her first entry. "Today I remembered that I used to love marketing. I was good at it. Maybe I can be good at it again. Maybe Michael was wrong about everything. Maybe I'm not damaged goods. Maybe I'm just getting started." The words looked small on the page, but they felt enormous in her heart. Outside, the October night was clear and full of stars. The storm had passed, leaving everything clean and new. Sarah closed the notebook and smiled for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears to face, new steps to take. But tonight, she was proud of herself for taking the first one. The journey back to herself had begun. 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized, and Denver's winter had settled in with its characteristic intensity. Sarah stood in her new apartment, a cozy one-bedroom in the trendy Rhino district, looking out at the snow-covered streets. The space was a fraction of the size of the house she'd shared with Michael, but it felt like freedom. The morning routine she'd established was sacred now. Wake at 6 a.m., 20 minutes of yoga, a habit Dr. Williams had encouraged, coffee with her gratitude journal, then 2 hours of online courses before her part-time job at Morrison Marketing's competitor, Digital Dynamics. Today, I'm grateful for, Sarah wrote in her journal, the interview with Apex Technologies this afternoon. Grateful for Jessica's friendship. Grateful for small progress. She paused, pen hovering over the page. Grateful that I didn't let his words become my truth. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Ready to kill it today? Remember, they need you more than you need them. Sarah smiled. Jessica had become her personal cheerleader, accountability partner, and voice of reason, all rolled into one. Their friendship had deepened through Sarah's transformation, proving that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the darkest soil. At Digital Dynamics, Sarah's supervisor Marcus Chen, Jessica's husband, and a brilliant creative director, watched as she put the finishing touches on a campaign proposal for a local brewery. "This is exceptional work, Sarah," Marcus said, reviewing her mock-ups on the computer screen. "The way you've woven the brand story into the visual narrative, it's exactly what they need. How are you feeling about the Apex interview?" "Nervous," Sarah admitted, adjusting her blazer. She'd lost 15 pounds through a combination of stress, healthier eating, and evening walks around her neighborhood. More importantly, she'd gained something more valuable: confidence. "It's been almost 7 years since I interviewed for a real position." "Hey." Marcus turned his chair to face her directly. "You've been doing real work here for 2 months. The Confluence Coffee account increased their revenue by 30% after implementing your social media strategy. The downtown yoga studio doubled their membership. You're not the same person who walked in here 3 months ago asking for a part-time position." Sarah nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. The scared, broken woman who'd signed those divorce papers felt like someone from another lifetime. At 2 p.m., Sarah walked into the sleek offices of Apex Technologies in downtown Denver's financial district. The company specialized in healthcare software solutions, a growing field that excited her more than she'd expected. "Ms. Martinez?" A tall woman with short auburn hair and an infectious smile approached. "I'm Rebecca Thompson, head of marketing. Ready to change the world?" Sarah blinked, momentarily thrown by the coincidence of the name. Not the same Rebecca, of course, but it felt like a sign. Absolutely. The interview was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. Instead of sitting across a conference table, being grilled about her resume gap, Rebecca led her through the office, introducing her to team members and discussing real challenges the company faced. "We're at a crucial point," Rebecca explained, as they settled in her corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rockies. "We've got incredible technology that could revolutionize patient care, but we're struggling to communicate that to hospital administrators and healthcare providers. We need someone who can translate complex tech into compelling human stories." Sarah's mind immediately began spinning with possibilities. What if you focused on the patient outcomes rather than the technology itself? Stories of real people whose lives improved because their doctors had better tools? Rebecca's eyes lit up. Exactly. We've been so focused on the technical specifications that we forgot about the heart of what we do. She leaned forward. "Tell me about a time you had to overcome a significant challenge." Sarah took a breath. realizing this was her moment to be honest about her journey. A year ago, I was coming out of a difficult divorce. My ex-husband told me no one would want me, that my skills were obsolete, that I was basically unemployable. She straightened her shoulders. I decided to prove him wrong. How? First, I got therapy to address the emotional damage. Then I threw myself into learning everything I could about digital marketing trends I'd missed. I took online courses, attended virtual conferences, started a part-time position to rebuild my portfolio. Most importantly, I remembered why I loved this work in the first place. It's about connecting with people, solving problems, telling stories that matter. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Sarah, I have to ask, when could you start the sigh? Words hit Sarah like electricity. Are you offering me the position? Senior marketing manager with a team of 3, full benefits, and a salary that I think will surprise you. Rebecca slid a folder across the desk. We believe in second chances here, especially for people who've shown they can fight their way back from adversity. Sarah opened the folder and nearly gasped. The salary was $30,000 more than she'd made at her previous job 7 years ago. More than that, it was validation that she hadn't lost her touch. She'd refined it. That evening, Sarah called Jessica from her apartment, pacing excitedly across the hardwood floors. You got it? Jessica shrieked so loudly that Sarah had to hold the phone away from her ear. I got it. I actually got it, Jess. They want me to start Monday. We're celebrating. Tonight, Marcus is making his famous enchiladas, and we're breaking out the good tequila. As Sarah got ready for dinner, she caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror she'd bought for her bedroom. The transformation was remarkable. Not just the weight loss or the new haircut, or the professional wardrobe she'd carefully assembled from thrift stores and sales. It was something deeper, something that glowed from within. At Jessica and Marcus's house in Park Hill, surrounded by the warmth of true friendship, Sarah felt a completeness she'd never experienced during her marriage. These people celebrated her successes, supported her through challenges, and saw her potential even when she couldn't see it herself. To Sarah, Marcus raised his glass of tequila, for proving that the Phoenix is real, and she's spectacular when she rises. To proving my asshole ex-husband wrong, Jessica added with characteristic bluntness. To new beginnings, Sarah said, softly, feeling the weight and promise of the words. Later that night, Sarah sat in her apartment writing in her journal. The city sparkled beyond her windows, full of possibilities she was finally ready to embrace. 6 months ago, I was convinced I was worthless, she wrote. Tonight, I know I'm just getting started. The scared woman who believed Michael's cruel words is gone. In her place is someone I'm proud to be, someone who fought for herself and won. She closed the journal and opened her laptop, drafting an email to Dr. Williams to share the good news. Her therapy sessions had been the foundation of everything, the safe space where she'd learned to silence his voice in her head and listen to her own instead. As she prepared for bed, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Her heart skipped when she saw the name that appeared. Michael Martinez. Heard through mutual friends about your new job. Congrats. Maybe we could grab coffee and catch up sometime. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, remembering the power his words once held over her. The old Sarah might have responded immediately, might have read hidden meanings into his sudden interest, might have wondered if he'd realized his mistake. The new Sarah deleted the message without responding. She had better things to do than look backward. Tomorrow was her first day at Apex Technologies, and she had a world to change. 1 year later, Sarah stood before a packed conference room at the Colorado Convention Center, delivering the keynote presentation for the Rocky Mountain Healthcare Innovation Summit. Her presentation, Humanizing Healthcare Technology. From data points to life stories, had drawn industry leaders from across the country. When we forget that behind every data point is a human being with fears, hopes, and dreams, Sarah's voice carried clearly through the auditorium. We lose the very heart of why healthcare technology exists. The slide behind her showed before and after patient stories, lives transformed by the software solutions her campaigns had helped implement across dozens of hospitals. In the audience, Dr. James Harrison, CEO of Denver General Hospital, leaned over to his colleague. "Who is this woman? We need her working with us." Sarah concluded her presentation to thunderous applause, her confidence evident in every gesture. She wore a tailored navy suit that fit her transformed figure perfectly. She'd lost 30 pounds through her dedication to morning yoga, weekend hikes in the Rockies, and the natural energy that came from living authentically. Her hair, now, styled in a sophisticated bob with subtle highlights, framed features that glowed with self-assurance. The scared, broken woman from 2 years ago existed only in memory. After the presentation, Sarah was surrounded by business cards and collaboration requests. Apex Technologies had promoted her to Director of Strategic Marketing after her campaigns, generated a 40% increase in client acquisition. More importantly, she'd built a team that shared her vision of purpose-driven marketing. Sarah Martinez? A familiar voice cut through the crowd. Sarah turned to see Amanda Foster, her former colleague from Morrison Marketing, approaching with a warm smile. "I heard you were back in the game, but this is incredible. You're the talk of the conference." "Amanda." Sarah embraced her old friend. "How are you? Still at Morrison?" "Actually, I just launched my own consultancy. Been following your work at Apex. Brilliant stuff. Listen, I know this might sound crazy, but would you be interested in partnering on some projects? I could use someone with your vision." Before Sarah could respond, her assistant Maya approached discreetly. "Sarah, sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here who says he knows you." Sarah followed Maya's gaze to the back of the conference room, where a figure stood partially hidden behind a pillar. Her breath caught as she recognized the silhouette. Michael. "Excuse me," Sarah told Amanda. "Can we continue this conversation over lunch tomorrow? I'd love to hear about your consultancy." Sarah made her way through the dispersing crowd, her heart rate elevated, but her mind clear. 2 years of therapy had prepared her for this moment, though she'd hoped it might never come. Michael stepped forward as she approached, and Sarah was struck by how different he looked. His once immaculate appearance had become slightly disheveled, his suit wrinkled, his face showing stress lines that hadn't been there before. Most noticeably, his confident swagger had been replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. "Sarah," he said, attempting his old charming smile. "You look amazing. Incredible, actually." "Michael." Her voice was neutral, professional. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see for myself. When I heard you were keynoting the healthcare summit, Sarah, I never knew you had this in you, this passion, this power." Sarah studied his face, looking for the manipulation tactics she'd learned to recognize in therapy. "What do you want, Michael?" "To talk, to apologize, to maybe see if we could try again." The words tumbled out quickly, as if he'd rehearsed them. "I made mistakes, Sarah. Huge ones. I was an idiot to let you go." The old Sarah might have felt validation at these words, might have seen them as proof that she'd been right to love him, right to fight for their marriage. The new Sarah saw them for what they were: too little, too late, and entirely self-serving. "You didn't let me go, Michael. You pushed me out. There's a difference." Sarah's voice remained calm but firm. "You told me no one would want me, that I was damaged goods, that my skills were obsolete." Michael's face flushed. "I was angry, hurt, going through my own stuff. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Sarah interrupted. "And you know what? In a twisted way, I should thank you. Because believing I was worthless motivated me to prove I wasn't. Sarah, please, I've changed. Rebecca and I... It didn't work out. She was nothing like you. No depth, no substance. I realize now what I had, what I threw away. The mention of Rebecca sparked something in Sarah, not jealousy, but a profound sadness for who she used to be. Michael, do you know what I realized in therapy? You didn't love me. You loved what I provided for you, the support, the admiration, the way I made your life easier. But you never saw me as a whole person with my own dreams and potential. That's not true. It is true. You were threatened by the idea that I might be successful in my own right. That's why you discouraged me from going back to work, why you made me feel small, why you convinced me I was lucky to have you. Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. You needed me to be less than you to feel secure. Michael's composure cracked. Okay, yes. Maybe I was insecure. Maybe I handled things badly. But we could work on that. We could go to counseling together. You're successful now. We could be a power couple. Sarah almost laughed at the transparent self-interest in his words. Michael, I'm not interested in being part of anyone's power couple fantasy. I'm interested in being myself, fully and authentically. Something I could never do when I was with you. Don't say that. We had good times. We loved each other. You loved a version of me that you helped create. Small, dependent, grateful. I loved a version of you that I hoped existed underneath the cruelty. Sarah's voice softened slightly. But neither of those people were real. Michael's shoulders sagged as he realized his words weren't having the effect he'd hoped for. So, that's it? You won't even consider... Michael, I'm going to say something, and I want you to really hear it. Sarah stepped closer, her voice clear and unwavering. The woman you're looking at right now, confident, successful, self-assured, she exists because you're not in her life. Your absence didn't break me. It freed me. The silence stretched between them as the weight of her words settled in. I need to go, Sarah continued. I have dinner plans with friends who actually celebrate my successes, instead of feeling threatened by them. As she walked away, Michael called after her. Sarah, wait, I love you. She paused at the conference room door and looked back, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. No, Michael. You love the idea of having me back now that I'm successful. But you don't get to benefit from the growth you tried to prevent. That evening, Sarah sat in a trendy Lodo restaurant with Jessica, Marcus, Amanda, and several colleagues from Apex. The conversation flowed easily from business opportunities to weekend hiking plans to the latest book everyone was reading. Earth. To Sarah. Jessica waved a hand in front of her face. You've been quiet since the conference. Everything okay? Sarah took a sip of her wine and smiled at the faces around the table. People who knew her story, who'd supported her journey, who loved her not despite her strength but because of it. Everything's perfect, she said. Michael showed up at the conference today. The table went quiet, everyone knowing the significance of that statement. And, Jessica prompted. And I realized something. The woman he fell in love with. The one he married. She was already diminished when he met her. She was so afraid of being alone that she made herself smaller to keep him comfortable. Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. But the woman I am now? She would never have been attracted to him in the first place. Marcus raised his glass. To Sarah, for becoming the woman she was always meant to be. To growth, Amanda added. To choosing yourself, Jessica said with tears in her eyes. As they toasted, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. The girl who'd believed love meant sacrifice had become a woman who knew love meant celebration. The person who'd defined herself through someone else's eyes had learned to see herself clearly. Later that night, in her apartment that had become a true home, Sarah opened her journal for what she decided would be her final entry about Michael. Today, I faced my past and chose my future, she wrote. He wanted me back, but not because he loves who I am, because he's impressed by what I've achieved. He still doesn't see me as a complete person, just as a prize to be won. The difference is, now I see myself clearly and I like what I see. I don't need his validation or anyone else's. I am enough, exactly as I am. She closed the journal and looked around her apartment, at the awards on her walls, the photos with friends who'd supported her journey, the books she'd read to rebuild, her knowledge, the hiking boots that had carried her up mountains both literal and metaphorical. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new challenges, new adventures, and she would meet them all as the woman she'd become, complete, confident, and finally truly free. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her corner office at Apex Technologies, looking out at the Denver skyline as spring painted the city in fresh greens and blooming colors. Her latest campaign had just launched nationwide, a series of patient testimonials that had already generated unprecedented engagement for healthcare technology marketing. Maya knocked on her open door. "Sarah, there's someone here to see you who doesn't have an appointment. Says it's personal?" Sarah turned from the window, already suspecting who it might be. "Let me guess. Michael Martinez?" Maya nodded, looking uncomfortable. "He seems persistent. Should I call security?" "No, it's fine. Send him in, but stay close by, okay?" Michael entered her office looking better than he had at the conference, his hair freshly cut, wearing an expensive new suit, carrying flowers and what appeared to be jewelry box. The calculated nature of his appearance wasn't lost on Sarah. "Sarah, you look incredible. This office, this view, you've really made it." He gestured around the space, taking in the awards, the team photos, the evidence of her success. "Thank you. You have 5 minutes, Michael. I have a meeting with the executive team." He set the flowers on her desk, white roses, her former favorite, though her tastes had evolved to prefer the wildflowers she gathered during weekend hikes. "I've been thinking about what you said at the conference. You were right about everything. I was insecure, controlling, cruel even." Sarah remained standing, maintaining the power dynamic. "Okay, I've been in therapy, Sarah. Real therapy, not just anger management. Dr. Peterson, you'd like him? He's helped me understand how my own childhood trauma made me need to control the people I loved." Michael opened the jewelry box, revealing the diamond necklace Sarah had admired years ago at Tiffany, but which he'd deemed too expensive. "I want to make amends. I want to show you I've changed." Sarah looked at the necklace. Beautiful, expensive, and completely meaningless to who she'd become. "Michael, I'm glad you're in therapy, genuinely. Everyone deserves to heal and grow." His face brightened, misreading her tone as encouragement. "But," Sarah continued, "your healing journey doesn't entitle you to a place in my life. Apologies. Don't erase damage, and change doesn't rewrite history. Sarah, please. Just hear me out." Michael moved closer to her desk. "I know I hurt you. I know I said unforgivable things. But look at what you've accomplished. In a way, I pushed you to become this incredible woman. Maybe that was meant to happen so we could come together as equals now." The audacity of his words, claiming credit for her success after trying to destroy her confidence, would have devastated the old Sarah. The new Sarah felt only pity. "Michael, do you hear yourself? You're trying to take credit for my achievements after telling me I was worthless. You're suggesting that your cruelty was somehow a gift." Sarah's voice remained calm, but her words cut deep. "That's not growth. That's manipulation with a therapy vocabulary. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. You've watched me succeed, and now you want to attach yourself to that success. But here's what you don't understand. Every achievement, every moment of confidence, every ounce of self-worth I've built came from learning to live without your voice in my head." Michael's composure began to crack. You can't just throw away 8 years of marriage. We have history. Connection? We have history? Sarah agreed. But connection requires mutual respect, and you've never respected me as an equal. Even now, you're not here because you miss me as a person. You're here because you miss having access to someone successful. Sarah walked around her desk, maintaining eye contact. I want you to understand something clearly. The woman you married was broken. She accepted crumbs of affection and called it love. She tolerated disrespect and called it compromise. She made herself smaller to make you feel bigger. Sarah, I'm not finished. Her voice carried an authority that commanded attention. The woman standing in front of you now would never have accepted your treatment. She wouldn't have stayed silent when you belittled her dreams. She wouldn't have believed your lies about her worth. This woman, the one you claim to want back, exists precisely because she chose herself over you. Michael's face reddened with frustration. So you're just going to be alone forever? Prove some feminist point by staying bitter? The question revealed everything Sarah needed to know about how little he'd actually changed. Michael, I'm not alone. I have friends who celebrate my successes, colleagues who respect my expertise, a life full of purpose and joy. I'm not bitter, I'm selective. There's a difference. But don't you want love? A family? Someone to share your success with? I do. Want love, Sarah said softly. Real love, where someone sees my strength as beautiful, not threatening, where my achievements are celebrated, not minimized, where I can be fully myself without fear of judgment or retaliation. I could be that person now. No, you couldn't. Because you fundamentally don't see me as a complete person. Even in this conversation, you've made it about what you need, what you want, what you've realized. You haven't asked about my happiness, my goals, my life. You've just assumed that because you're ready to accept the successful version of me, I should be grateful. The truth of her words hung in the air between them. Michael's mask of contrition slipped, revealing the familiar flash of anger that had once terrified her. You know what, Sarah? Maybe I was right the first time. Maybe you are damaged goods. You're so caught up in this victim narrative that you can't see a good thing when it's standing right in front of you. Sarah smiled, actually smiled at his words. There it is, the real Michael. Thank you for reminding me why I left. I'm offering you everything you wanted. Marriage, commitment, a future together. What more do you need? I need you to leave my office. Sarah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. And I need you to understand that your chapter in my story is over. Not paused, not on hold. Over. Michael grabbed the flowers from her desk, his face twisted with rejection and rage. You'll regret this, Sarah. You think you're so successful? Now, but you're still just a lonely, divorced woman who's too proud to admit she needs someone. Maya, Sarah called calmly. Maya appeared instantly in the doorway. Please escort Mr. Martinez to the elevator. He won't be returning. As Michael was led away, he called back over his shoulder. You can't stay angry forever, Sarah. I'll wait. For you to come to your senses. After they left, Sarah sat in her chair and took a deep breath. She felt lighter, as if she'd just set down a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Dinner tonight? New sushi place in Cherry Creek? Sarah smiled and typed back. Perfect. I have news to share. That evening, surrounded by her chosen family, Jessica, Marcus, Amanda, and several other close friends, Sarah recounted the encounter. The table erupted in supportive outrage at Michael's audacity and celebration of Sarah's response. I'm so proud of you, Jessica said, reaching across the table to squeeze Sarah's hand. 2 years ago, you would have second-guessed yourself for weeks after a conversation like that. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been capable of having that conversation, Sarah replied. I would have been too afraid of seeming ungrateful or mean. What changed? Amanda asked. I mean, Beyond the obvious. Sarah considered the question carefully. I learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Michael was right about one thing. I am alone in the sense that I'm not part of a couple. But I'm not lonely. I have people who love me for who I am, work that fulfills me, goals that excite me. I don't need someone to complete me because I'm already complete. Marcus raised his sake cup. To Sarah, for showing us all what it looks like to choose yourself first. As they toasted, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. The scared woman who'd signed divorce papers in a storm-darkened kitchen felt like someone from another lifetime. In her place sat a woman who knew her worth, who surrounded herself with people who celebrated her strength, who had built a life so full and beautiful that toxic love held no appeal. Later that night, Sarah sat in her apartment writing in a new journal. Not the one where she documented her healing, but one dedicated to her future dreams and aspirations. Today, I finally closed the door on my past, she wrote. Not with anger or bitterness, but with clarity and strength. Michael came back, just like I always thought I wanted him to. But the woman who wanted him back doesn't exist anymore. She was replaced by someone who knows that no is a complete sentence, that love should elevate rather than diminish, and that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who makes you feel small. She paused, looking around her. Apartment, now filled with art from local Denver artists, plants she'd learned to care for, books that challenged and inspired her, and photos of adventures with people who truly knew and loved her. The most beautiful part, she continued writing, is that I don't feel vindicated or victorious. I feel free. Free from the need to prove anything to him. Free from the hope that he might change. Free from the fantasy of who we could have been. I'm finally, completely, authentically free. Sarah closed the journal and walked to her window, looking out at the city lights of Denver twinkling like stars. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities. Amanda had offered her a partnership in the consultancy. Dr. Harrison from Denver General had called about a revolutionary new project, and she had a hiking date with a kind, successful architect named David, whom she'd met at a bookstore. Someone who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, her dreams, her complete self. But even if none of those opportunities panned out, even if she spent the next decade single and career-focused, she knew she would be happy. Because she had learned the most important lesson of all. She was enough, exactly as she was, all by herself. Her phone buzzed with one final text of the evening, from Dr. Williams. Heard through the grapevine about today's encounter. How are you feeling? Sarah smiled and typed back. Like I finally understand what self-love actually means. Thank you for helping me find my way back to myself. You did the work, Sarah. I just provided the space for you to remember who you always were underneath all that pain. As Sarah prepared for bed, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the broken woman crying over divorce papers, to the confident professional who could look her ex-husband in the eye and choose herself without hesitation. The storm that had raged the night she signed her divorce papers now seemed like a metaphor for the tempest she'd weathered internally. She'd emerged from it stronger, clearer, and more herself than she'd ever been. Michael had been wrong about everything. Someone would want her after divorce. She wanted herself, completely and unapologetically. Her skills weren't obsolete. They were sharper and more refined than ever. She wasn't damaged goods. She was a woman who had faced her deepest fears and emerged victorious. Most importantly, she had learned that the opinion that mattered most was her own. And in her own eyes, she was magnificent. As sleep came, Sarah's last thought was of gratitude, not for Michael's cruelty, which she would never thank him for, but for her own resilience, for the friends who had supported her journey, for the therapist who had guided her healing, and for the strength she'd found within herself when she needed it most. The woman who had once believed she was nothing without a man had become everything to herself. And that, Sarah knew as she drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, was the most beautiful love story of all. Outside her window, Denver slept peacefully under a canopy of stars, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled softly, not the angry storm of destruction this time, but the gentle promise of rain that would nourish new growth in the morning. Sarah Martinez was finally, completely, beautifully free.